Hey, welcome to Dear Romance Writer. We're two writers today discuss um we try to deliver happy ever afters and offer questionable advice for all of your relationship, work, and life problems. I'm Zio Axelrod.
And I'm Roan Parrish. We've got a great show for you today. Avery is still recovering from her bug, but
Oh,
hopefully
poor thing.
we're back here next time. Yeah. Um, yeah, anyway, it has, as always, been a week. How are you, Zio?
I'm okay. I'm sort of settling into the reality that it is autumn. It's my favorite season, but I feel like I'm not quite ready for the sun doesn't come up until 8 a.m. and goes down at 4 p.m. time of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I also feel like the seasonal shift happened weirdly late this season.
Hmm.
Um, and so I've decided that October 31st, Halloween ushered in October. So
Mm.
that was the first
Yeah.
October, and then November is now October part two,
Hmm.
until December 1st, when it will be the holiday season.
Right.
So join me if you want in this second
Yeah.
October that we're having.
I like it. I like October is an awesome month. So I'm happy to have an extended October.
I
But
totally
the
agree. November is useless. Nothing good happens in it. So it should clearly be subsumed by October. And
although now that we are properly celebrating Native American Heritage Month in November, it's like finally coming into its own because before that it had my least favorite holiday in it. You know what I mean? And like,
yes, I
so I
do.
feel like, we're celebrating the right things now in the month
Yes.
of November. So you have some things to prove, November. Prove us wrong.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's a great point.
I was a little like miffed that literally the day after Halloween, they started showing like holiday commercials.
Oh my God.
And it was subtle. It wasn't like, Santa Claus and Christmas trees, but it was like the lights in the background and like you hear bells jingling. And I was like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a slow slide. I
Yeah.
just think, have some fucking respect. The veil is
Hmm.
thin, everything's still flying around, and you're
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're getting toward the end of the year, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to 2022. I don't want to wish time away because you should like enjoy every moment, but 2020 tested us all. 2021 wasn't a whole lot better, even though we did go to a Flyers game.
Does that make
Which was like,
it better?
well, it was like going to an actual event where people and the energy and the cheering for the team and that kind of stuff. It was at we were at the Wells Fargo Center in Philly, and so it's like, everyone had to wear masks and they got a new ventilation system, and it was about 40-45% capacity, and we were in a box because Mr. X's company has a box, so we were like away from other people mostly. So
Nice.
we felt safe. It was like I'd been to a couple places, indoor places, but he hadn't. So for him, it was like a big deal to go to somewhere, and it was a lot of people. But we felt, safe enough. But it was weird thinking
Yeah.
about all the concerts and stuff you've been to, and then you
God.
don't do that for 2 years, and you go back, and it's like, oh my God, there's people. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally. Yeah, we went, Timmy and my friend Christina and I went for like before Halloween to Field of Screams,
mhm.
near Lancaster, PA, and it's like a huge haunted attraction, like 200 houses, a haunted hayride, and a haunted like outdoor thing. And it was the first like big public thing that I went to. And we were wearing masks, but I would say we were part of the 10% of people that were wearing masks, and none of the performers were. And so in the haunted houses, it's like people getting very close and touching you and doing all this stuff.
Yeah,
And I was like, how are these people that are not wearing masks letting these total strangers breathe on their faces?
yeah,
That's the real horror of this haunted
yeah,
house.
yeah.
Meanwhile, they all saw, like, those of us wearing masks, the people didn't come as close to us because clearly they were like, oh, these people acknowledge there's a global pandemic going on.
Right, right.
Anyway, it
Yeah,
was like it was stressful, actually. I mean, I
yeah,
loved it. The haunted houses were amazing, but it was definitely stressful being in close proximity with people and just like not trusting them, because I'm like, well, if you
yeah.
don't understand the global pandemic going on, what other like batshit things might you do?
Exactly, right? Yeah, it was weird. Like we were in this box, which only seats like 20-25 people. But it was full, but everyone was there was from Mr. X's company, and everyone has to get vaccinated. Even if you're vaccinated, they still test every other week. So like
Right.
they're very diligent about it. So we knew everyone around us was vaccinated and, negative and stuff like that. But, they were like, wear your masks unless you're eating or drinking. And we just looked around. People were just like holding things so that they wouldn't have to put their masks on and stuff. So we were like, putting that thing back up. But yeah, it was some people
Ooh,
just really don't take this whole thing seriously. And I don't get it. But we don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
no,
That's a
I
whole different conversation.
I also don't get it, and
Yeah.
that's why I have to move to the middle of nowhere and with no one around me and never speak to anyone again. Anyway, speaking of things that suck, um, just kidding. No, speaking of basically stressful things, let's get on to our letter.
Yeah.
So this is a great one. It's from Love Letters. Okay. And it's signed My Heart, which, very sad. Okay.
Mm.
Several years after college, I lived with a boyfriend for 3 years who I thought I would marry. We loved each other very much, but had some trust issues, and our relationship ultimately ended badly. Fast forward to today, 21 years later. I've been married for 14 years. He's been married for several more. We got back in touch probably 3 years ago now and had been emailing/texting almost daily after some on and off contact since about 2008 until we finally met up again in June. Our emails and texts were mostly flirty and sexual in nature, and we met up to fool around. When we saw each other, it was as though no time had passed, and I felt as if I'd found my missing piece. He felt the same. It was less about sex and more about wanting to just be together. He lives far away and was here for a quick visit, so we just saw each other twice for about an hour each time. We just talked and kissed. Being with him made me happier than I've felt in a very long time, but now I'm lost. We're both married with kids. Do I follow my heart and see where things could go with him, or do I stay in my marriage knowing that a huge piece of my heart is with someone else? Signed, My Heart.
I feel like we've had not this issue, but this conversation before where it's like, not the cliche of the pros and cons, like look at your life now and look at what the potential could be and weigh those things and figure out which one you're willing to take a risk on. Like, are you going to risk staying where you are and being content there, sort of like the devil or are you going to risk throwing all of that away with all the consequences that come with that? 14 years is, that's a life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And, there's kids involved and stuff like that to go after this thing that, I mean, admittedly, they were kids when it ended badly, quote
Right.
unquote. But yeah, I mean, this could be just escapism for the both of them. And then they get together and find out that's all it was. Like, that's a lot. You're talking about two families, two lifetimes to disrupt, to chase this thing that's just thrilling and like the flash of passion or whatever is happening there. Like that's these are some huge huge issues here.
Yeah, and part of me wishes that this letter writer had added, like, how is her current relationship or their current relationship?
Yeah.
What's the status? I mean, okay, it's interesting because I was just talking about this with a friend recently who has been contacted kind of out of the blue 2 times in a row recently by exes, like people that he dated 10 years before.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about it, and he was like, am I giving off some kind of like hit me up after 10 years vibe? Because with 2 different people,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting because I mean, no, I don't think there's some like hit me up after 10 years vibe per se, but I do think that people like there are some people who cycle in and out of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean in some kind of like fated mates kind of way, but like if you have relationships with people, there are cycles to them. And I do think that like social media has set us up to be able to get back in touch in these ways, or even just like email.
Yeah.
Get back in touch and see pieces of people's lives in these ways that like previously weren't as common.
Mm-hmm.
And
They suggest to you, like, like you have mutual friends or whatever, and it's like, oh, and you're like, man, I haven't talked to that person in 10 years, but they're like right there. And it's tempting to click and see photos and yeah.
Exactly. And I think that my main thought about this person's relationship when they say like they only met up for an hour two
Yeah,
times.
an hour or two times.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think that like literally 2 hours of a good time with someone is worth throwing away a relationship. But I think that's not really the question even. I think that like the question is, like you were saying, is always about choosing potential over um like status quo.
Hmm.
And for most people who are in this situation, my sense is it's not really about like the person at all. It's
Yeah.
really about looking at yourself and saying like, oh, I am suddenly reminded that my life is not set, that there are things that I can do that can set me on a new path. And
Hmm.
like, I have opportunities that are not just continue in the life that I had. And I think that I'm assuming that this letter writer is a woman, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't think they say.
They don't say, but one
Mhm.
of the things that I think is super interesting, and obviously this happens to people socialized as men too, but I think one thing that's really interesting is that like overwhelmingly the people that I know in this situation have always been women. And I think that for me, part of it seems like people socialized as women are taught by society that when you get married to someone and have kids, you've like achieved your goal
Mhm.
and you've done it. So henceforth, your life is just living through that goal, like until you die.
Mhm.
And I not in a that I mean that life may be wonderful, but like
Yeah,
that's the achievement of your social slash romantic
that's the
life.
pinnacle that you can, that, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And so then what happens is people who achieve that goal start to feel like, well, I don't have any more choices left. I don't have any more like any choice that I might have about the way my life is going to go isn't going to be in that realm. Maybe it's going to
Mhm.
be a job thing and that could change or a friend thing. But like in terms of my romantic life, it's just set. I reached the thing and now it's done.
Mhm.
And I think that like that's different for men. They're not people socialized as men are not taught that in quite the same way.
Right.
Um, Especially because they can have kids like biologically later and have second families and third families or whatever. But more
Mhm.
importantly, I think like people socialized as women learn that like once they've achieved the pinnacle, they know what their life is going to look like. And I
Yeah.
feel like these kind of scenarios happen and the person doesn't matter, the new relationship doesn't matter, but what it is this reinvigorization of a piece of your life that you were told by society is
Was
like
gone. Mhm.
changing. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so the intoxicating thing, I think, isn't this person. Like you feel comfortable and familiar and a spark with them because you knew them a bunch of years ago. And so you already have shared common ground. It's
Yeah.
not magical. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
the love of your life. It's just good old fashioned, like meeting up with an old friend you knew in high school.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia. Yeah.
Yeah. And like filling in the blanks and being like, I don't have to do small talk with this person because we already know each other. And that
Mhm.
feels magical because it like skirts social norms. So I wouldn't worry about this person. Like they're not your soulmate. I mean, maybe they are, but like that's not the point. The point
Right.
is that you feel like you are getting back in touch with like the possibilities of your own life in a way that
Mhm.
feels so intoxicating that you
Mhm.
are actually contemplating like throwing away or losing a marriage of 14 years and like your family.
Mhm.
And what that says to me above all is, girl, you got to get out more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you need to invigorate your life with your partner or with yourself in ways that give you this opportunity to feel the kind of like potential and uncertainty and excitement that you felt having this meetup with this ex who you haven't seen in years and years and years.
Yeah, not even the meetups though, but the 3 years of texting and emailing, because
Right.
they basically, this was all prefaced by, okay, we got back in touch, and then off and on, and then for some reason, because it was 2008, and then they met up again, and then all of a sudden it was like 3 years solid of having a side relationship of
Yeah.
texts and emails and stuff, and that was finally consummated physically.
Right.
So there was definitely either something missing in this person's life, some part of them that they lost touch with. There was a disconnect. So like you said, they need to figure out whether they can connect with that part of themselves in the marriage that they're in, do they need to be single to connect with that part of themselves? Do they need to be with this other person? Is it the other person that brings it out in them? That's the misconception, right? Like you need this other person to bring it out. Like, they need to really do some self-reflection here rather than this, my spouse or this guy. There's another path, right? There's another path. So yeah, like you always talk about dating yourself and getting to know yourself. And I think this is a prime example of someone who really needs to figure out what they want from life before they, no, don't go to your partner and say, I'm leaving you for this person. You know what I mean? That's like, because if that implodes on that side and then your partner is here and then what do you do? Right. So figure out what you want.
Yeah.
Before you decide anything, really. Even if you say to your partner, you know what, I'm at this place where I need to figure out what I want, give me some space or whatever it is, or this is where my head is or whatever it is, like have a conversation if you need to. But jumping from one thing into another is just recipe for disaster.
The thing that you would be jumping into is a fantasy, right? Like,
yeah, most likely. Yeah.
I mean, even 3 years of regular email contact, like, and I
it's still curated, right? It's curated.
It's all curated, and I certainly believe that you can fall in love with someone through words. Like,
oh yeah, of course,
for a living, of course, I believe that. But I think, like, if you're in a long-term marriage with kids, you have all these parts of that relationship that are the unfun parts, the clunky parts, the bickering about groceries parts, and none of that isn't going to be present with this other person. It's just that you aren't experiencing it with them. So it feels like a fantasy. It feels like an escape. It feels like a different kind of relationship than the one you have with your husband. And it is a different kind of relationship because it's one that has no errands or obligations. It's all the good parts and none of the sort of like slog parts. Yeah. And so if you were to leave your husband and go with this other person, eventually, no matter how much you loved each other, your relationship would then also start to have the slog parts. And
they're built in because there's two families involved. It's not like, are you going to walk away from your kids? So your kids and his kids are still going to be part of your life.
Yeah.
You're still going to have, yeah, right. It's a Brady Bunch, but with like, so yeah. You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. It's not a great situation.
It's not. Well, okay. Can I ask us like a kind of a sub or a secondary question to this, which is, the thing that I can't stop thinking about is this person's partner, that she's been maintaining a relationship with while having this 3-year sort of like emotional affair and now physical affair as well. Like, do you think she should tell him? Do you think she owes it to him to tell him? What's your opinion about someone having this kind of emotional affair and like what their obligations are to their partner?
Yeah, I'm always back and forth on that because I'm, what is the old saying? Like, what you don't know won't hurt you or whatever, like that whole old adage or whatever. I think it's an individual choice because like especially if like she or he or they have this like stable home life that you're just going to drop this bomb on with kids involved and all of that, like how is that what are the repercussions of that? Like you have to find a way to have that conversation in a way that's safe for everyone, you know what I mean? Which I don't even know if that's possible. So I think it's an individual thing. If it's a relationship that is strained or they're just together for the kids or whatever it is, then that's a whole different situation. If it's one where they're like the partner is completely devoted and this is coming out of the blue, that could really cause some, you know what I mean? So like, I think it's like an individual thing, but it is interesting to me that they don't mention anything about the guy's family, the high school friend's family, because he's been married longer, also has kids.
Yeah.
I think maybe not.
I think so.
Yeah. So like, there's nothing in here about his situation at all. There's really nothing in here about their situation at home either. Yeah. It's all about the two of them,
right? Which
to me screams of escapism or like nostalgia. Like, remember we were 18 and together and how crazy and passionate and everything was, and now everything is just sort of like a drudgery. I've got to make get the kids to school and take them to soccer practice and all that other stuff. And when we were together, we didn't have any of that. And if we were together again, we wouldn't have any of that, but you would, because you're still, these kids aren't going to disappear just because you guys decide to be together. But anyway, that's a long answer to your question, but I think I would never say to someone, you have to or don't, because
Right.
it's all about the individual situation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I've been trying to answer that for myself. And like, I don't think that I could keep that a secret from my partner and just go on as if our I mean, I could never keep that a secret for three years.
Right,
I would,
right,
I couldn't do that. But also
right.
if I had, I think like, I don't know, I value, when I say I value honesty, I don't mean I value like never telling a tiny little lie or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. But what
Mm-hmm.
I value is genuine connection. And I guess I feel like if my partner were having what is essentially a very deep and long-term emotional affair with someone else, it's not that I think we couldn't still be having our relationship and have it be great. I believe that non-monogamy is totally valid and you certainly can be. But if I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know about it,
Right.
that like I think finding out about it, it would be heartbreaking and really upsetting, but also maybe it would answer some questions about like why our relationship had felt less connected
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
more
Yeah.
like, okay, honey, see you later, bye, like less, more surface.
Right,
So
right.
I don't know. I definitely am of the opinion that like you should be honest and genuine as much as you can out of
Yeah.
respect for the connection that you have with your partner. But
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
like, I don't have kids. I don't know. I mean, I say this as the child of like parents who are still together and still deeply in love. And I'm very grateful for that. And I had friends whose parents got divorced and it was very upsetting for them. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that they have a very different take on it, but I also don't ever think that you should stay together for your kids. Uh,
No, no,
I think it
no, no,
models
no.
I think it models behavior that I wouldn't want to imprint on a child, even if their life would for a few years be like somewhat less disturbed physically, like in terms of place. And yeah, again, I didn't experience divorced parents, so I understand that I don't know exactly, but I do feel strongly uh that if even if they are just staying together for the kids, that's not a good reason to stay together. But,
No, I think that staying together for the kids is an odd thing to me because kids feel all of that emotional strife and tension, and people think that kids can't pick up on that, which is really bizarre. And also, co-parenting doesn't have to be a marriage or romantic involvement. I have
right.
friends who co-parent and they're like really good friends, a couple of them best friends, like they take care of their kid and the kid is great. The kid is totally adjusted, well adjusted and happy, has both of his parents in his life and there's no, you know what I mean? Like not that they never argue or there's no like strife, but it's just so much less drama, you know what I mean, than trying to force a situation because we have to do it for the kid. Like, it's just I mean, my parents divorced when I was baby or toddler. I'm not even sure when it was, honestly. They should not have been together. They were just not a good fit. But yeah, my dad, it was his third, like it was like third time's a charm. It was his third wife, my stepmom, and she's fantastic. They've been married for like 30 something years,
Oh,
but it took a while for him to find his person.
right.
People, marriage is not for everyone, and marriage is not forever.
Right.
You go into it wanting it to be forever, but if it doesn't work out, there are ways to not be married anymore. And I think that pressure that religion and society puts on people to stay married when they're unhappy, deeply unhappy. And I'm not talking about like, you got on my nerves today, you put the toothbrush in wrong or something like that, but like that deep dissatisfaction and unfulfillment,
Mhm.
then what's the point?
I know. I just wouldn't
Like,
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, frankly, that kind of like not feeling good in your own home, in your own relationship with the
yeah,
person you're supposed to be able to trust with every part of you. Like
yeah,
I would not wish on my worst enemy the feeling of being stuck in that. And I would never want children to grow up thinking that that's the ideal.
exactly.
Guilt of thinking that your very presence in your parents' life made them stay in that situation when they could have gotten divorced and each like both been great parents and been happy. I just think that yeah, it's part of like there's this societal worship of children and parenthood that
And marriage.
and marriage that I think is
Yeah.
so toxic. And the idea that like we have to do all these things for the children. It's more important than our personal ambitions or happiness. I'm like, well, what messages then do you think your children are going to learn? Like,
Right.
it's not like you can say, we're going to stay together for our children because they're super important, but also we would never want our children to stay together in an unhappy relationship. And I'm like, well, they're going to, because they learned it from you.
Hmm. No, it's like you were saying, like women, people who are socialized as women are sometimes in certain communities taught that marriage is the end goal. That's the end goal, right? Marriage and children is the end game, and that even if you're miserable, you stick with it.
Yeah.
Like you just do not give up. Like you don't, it's like, you're failing if you somehow don't make this marriage work through thick and thin. Like doesn't matter if there's violence involved, if there's cheating involved, whatever it is, you just suck it up, and you find a way to be happy on your own. You take up your knitting, or you join the PTA or whatever it is. Like don't worry about that. And I don't understand that at all, like
I
at
don't
all.
either. And listening, when you say it like that, just hearing it reflected back, I'm like, that is so absurd.
It
That's
is.
ridiculous. First
It
of all,
is.
the fact that we live in like a couple, a society that places the couple above like a
Right.
collective or
Right.
a
Yeah.
triad or whatever is just arbitrary. I mean, it's arbitrary based on like patrilineal inheritance of land that we don't need anymore. So we can get
Yeah.
rid of that's fine. We could just jettison it. It's no big deal. Also, the fact that our rights, that like getting married has a literal gain in terms of like your financial uh
You're
and
rewarded for it.
whatever,
You're
you are
rewarded for it.
rewarded for it by
Yeah.
the government of our country is absurd. The entire thing is ridiculous. And I don't mean the like marriage for love. Like
Hmm.
like this is not a critique of people who want to be married to the person
Hmm.
they love. This is a critique of the institutionality
Yeah. Yeah.
of placing marriage as a system that is like lorded over all other potential systems of connection. And
Hmm.
when you look at it that way as something that's arbitrary, the idea that you would like at the age of say like 27 meet someone and marry them and have kids and then like consign yourself potentially to misery for the rest of your life if you fall out of love with them, I'm like, okay, cool, you only get one life. If that's how you want to live it,
Right.
that's your choice, but it seems like an absolutely bloody terrible one to me.
Yeah. Like you're right about the whole coupledom thing at being put at the top of the pyramid, because like remember, I don't remember who it was, maybe been Hillary Clinton or somebody, was something about it takes a village. Who was it
Yeah.
that said that it takes a village? And people were like up in arms because how dare you say that it takes a village? It's like,
Yeah,
well, what do you think like schools are? What do you think, your church or whatever it is? Like, what do you think? That's your community, that's your village. Like, what are you talking about? It's just, it's
absolutely.
so.
And the Western, like the especially like American tradition of moving out of your family's house and moving into just a domicile for your immediate nuclear family, so that you are purposely isolating yourself from the community of your family and friends, to raise a child is like just underscoring that.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know,
Yeah.
my sister and her wife have a kid, and they up until like 6 months ago lived in a collective house, and it was amazing because if they needed to like run out to the grocery store, they could call like one of their housemates is in the kitchen, and they could be like, hey, can you watch the kid for an hour?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're napping, just like listen to the monitor. Or now they just moved to Mount Airy and like landed in this idyllic little community with a bunch of other like young parents and
Oh,
kind of
awesome.
folks who've lived in the neighborhood forever, and just like watch all the neighborhood kids. And they have their kid in daycare that's like a roving daycare, so it's in a different person's house each week, like a
Oh,
different owner
wow.
kids, so that you don't need a space. You can just like use the houses of the people, and that means you get to play with different toys every week. You get to have different rules of the house every week, so you learn that like other people have rules that aren't the same as the rules of your house, and they should be
Right.
respected. And it's like it's really beautiful, I think, because their child is growing up like with a lot of adults, which means that these kids are never going to fall into the situation of being in a setting where like their parents are abusive and they don't know anyone that they can turn to, right?
Right. Right. Right.
They have this whole network of adults. They are in daycare with these other kids who they're learning like their cultures, the rules of their homes, the traditions of their family and their holidays and everything. And it's like, yeah, that's a great way to not, it's not the only way to do it, but it's, to me, it seems so much more practical
It's
and so
as valid, if not more. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's just so much more manageable than having like one of the parents has to go to the bathroom and the other one's at work. So you have to just like your kids
Right. Yeah.
sitting there. You have to like take the kid into the
Yeah.
toilet with you or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I have other friends who are a part of a romantic triad who have a kid. And I was hanging out with my friend the other day and was like, hey, how's everything going? Like, how's the baby? And she was like, you know what makes raising a kid way easier? Having three people around. Like, so it's interesting to read a letter like this.
Yeah.
And just so many of the other letters we get that are like, clearly the solution to these people's problems is destroy the white supremacist heteropatriarchy. Like that's just the clear answer.
Yeah.
Like all of your problems are because you respect the rules of society and culture that wants you to suffer.
Yeah.
But we just keep
But it's amazing that in 2021, now almost 2022, you have people who are still, and it's not a fault or anything, it's just the way they were raised, bound to that idea that if they don't make this, if they don't stick with it, they've failed.
Right.
That's a huge obstacle to overcome emotionally when you've been conditioned your entire life, and especially for people who were socialized as women, because it's like boys will be boys, if he's flirting with the secretary or doing whatever, and you're like, oh well, he still comes home to me, like that whole thing. It's just like yeah. But in terms of this letter, yeah, I think that there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen, not only between the two high school, like I don't know, the two people who are reconnected, because they've got worlds built around them that they're going to blow up if they pursue this, and they need to decide whether it's just the exhilaration of being in something clandestine, you know what I mean, like the nostalgia of revisiting their youth, whatever it is, or if it's something really solid and like this is what should have happened, we were just too scared as kids, that we need to make this happen, let's figure out how we're going to do this without harm, without really doing the least amount of harm as we can. Then that's a conversation that they need to have. But crowdsourcing it is probably not going to help much.
No. Yeah. And I really do feel for everyone in this situation. It doesn't seem like there's any, like,
no,
already done the damage by having this 3-year long.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like you've done it, you're bad. I just mean like you made a choice that it's going to be damaging to yourself through heartbreak of losing one of these relationships. Or I mean, hey, maybe you will talk to your husband and be like, listen, I love you so much, but something has been missing and I am partly responsible because I've been having this reconnection with someone over the last few years and it's escalated. And maybe you'll say to your husband and your husband will be like, you know what, I also think something is missing and there's a person at work who I'm really attracted to and maybe we should both try to like maintain this relationship and open it up and like see where our hearts take us. That would be the best case scenario.
Yeah.
And if that happened, like fingers crossed that that's exactly what happens. But
I'm just going to pretend that that's what happens and then everyone ends up happy and the kids get like extra presents for birthdays and stuff. That's what's going on in my head now. And I don't want to hear anything else.
Can we fan fiction our letters that we get where we just
no. So the husband and the high school friend meet and there's a connection there.
Yes. And it's
there
like
we go.
The couples end up buying a compound and
oh my gosh, yes,
building sustainable farming and solar panels and rain barrels, and they live as two couples that all are romantically linked together and all the kids grow up and they're best friends and
they move to Vermont and they open a maple farm and
yes, and maybe a B&B.
Yes, okay, I love it. Congratulations everyone.
Congratulations, my heart, we solved
my heart. Yeah, we solved your problem. Okay. Avery's going to be sad that she missed that one because I'm sure she had plenty to say. She's probably like in the comments, Avery, in the comments.
Yeah, in the comments. Oh my gosh. Well, I really enjoyed talking about that. And I think that it kind of segues great into our topic, which is I think social media is destroying or impacting our communication. And I feel like we kind of already started talking about that.
Yeah.
Social media is like built into its design is this impetus to like reconnect, not just to connect you with new people, but to reconnect you with people that you may have lost touch with,
Yeah.
which is like definitely changing our communication. But yeah, what do you think? Is social media, I won't say ruining, but like changing, how is it changing our communication?
It's
Whatever.
changing the way people consume information. It's changing communication. It's changing connection. I am not a opponent of social media because I think it does way more good than it does bad in terms of like spreading information, connecting the world. Like I've seen so many beautiful stories. Like even I was reluctant to join TikTok, for instance. Like I knew there were like funny dance videos and all that kind of stuff on there, but I was like, yeah, that just sounds like another place for people to spew the stuff that they spew in social media. And but it's so the algorithms there, the way they work, it sort of guides you to the corner that you kind of want to be in. And if you find yourself in a corner you don't want to be in, you just quickly pivot, and so I feel like an interesting thing there. But I do think that it can be, well, I don't know if I was telling you about this. A couple of years ago, I went to see a band called Massive Attack in concert.
Love Massive.
And I never thought I'd get to see them because they, but I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go see that. I saw them twice. And their show was, them. And then they had their guest singers come out. And then behind them, they had these huge LED screens with like imagery flashing. And so each song was like a story. But the overall theme of the night was technology and how it's impacted our lives since they've been around, since the early 2000s or late 99s or whatever, late 90s. And one of the songs, and I can't remember which song it was, and I'll have to find the clip on YouTube, but it was talking about how we never let people die because we have images of them and we watch them. We're like, this is like the first time in history, these last 100 years or so, where we have images and recordings of dead people around us all the time. Like before you had maybe had a photograph or a painting or something like that, but now we have movies, we have recordings, we have digital photo, whatever it is, of people. And so they're always around. And so we're surrounding ourselves with imagery of people who aren't here anymore. And one day I logged on to Facebook, and you know how it does, like, you might know this person because you have mutual friends. It suggested that I friend someone who actually stalked me when I was in high school. And it was such a triggering moment for me that I like literally jumped out of my chair, slammed my laptop shut, and was like, what the hell? Because I haven't seen or heard from this person since I was in high school. So I don't know how Facebook even knew that we might know each other, except that we had like 3 or 4 people in common. And it just was like, those, it can cost you in that way. Or when you're like on Twitter or on TikTok or whatever it is, and some like piece of hate gets put in front of you, because it's trying to figure out whether you're interested in it or not. And it does, there's no one behind there going, oh, well, this might hurt this person, or this might, what I mean? This might trigger this person or bring up something or whatever. So I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of like AI and working with that, because that was not fun. That was not a fun moment. But I do think that our ability to listen, as we were talking about in the last episode, and absorb information and have discourse has been harmed, because we get everything so quickly, and everyone has the same voice, and everyone is shouting loudly, and so you don't know. That's why we have such a problem with misinformation now.
Right.
Because anybody can put on a suit and sit behind a desk and put a green screen behind that looks like a news thing and throw it up on YouTube, and people think it's a news, like an actual news program, and they just take ivermectin or whatever it is, what I mean? And you're like, what? This is not right. No, they're not real. But they can't discern the difference between like a regular news channel and what these people are doing. So I think in that way it's been really harmful. But I do think that in terms of like getting the word out, causes, when things happen in Japan, if there's an earthquake or whatever, people are motivated immediately to help. And I think that the way that social media deals with that is amazing. So I wouldn't want to give that up, but we need to figure out how to deal with the other part, the bad part. Long answer, but
no, and it's so interesting because I agree with you. I think that social media does so much good that I would never want to sacrifice it. I think of like, when we were teenagers, or maybe people like 10 years older than us were teenagers, and you could be like a queer kid in a small town in a rural
Hmm.
state and like a rural town and like not know a single other queer
Be
person.
completely isolated. Yeah.
Exactly. And like now that can't happen.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you
Yeah.
go to the library and use the internet, you don't even need to have a phone. Like you can find people who are like you to talk to,
Hmm.
you can get your questions answered. So I think that there's and to me that's worth like misinformation is bad, but misinformation plus lots of good information
Yeah.
is more important than no misinformation and only a little bit of information. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that like with social media literacy increasing, people do become more and more able to sort that out. And
Yeah.
honestly, that's a skill that just needs to be taught in school now. Like we don't have
Absolutely.
classes anymore, but we should. We don't
Yeah.
have, you know, we should when we're teaching kids like composition and close reading, we should teach media literacy, not
Yeah.
in like analyzing a film media literacy, but in like how do you know if a source is trustworthy? How do
Right.
you
Yeah.
find the information of who put up a website? Like these are just things that are going to have to be integrated into culture now that there are issues.
Hmm.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that the benefits of having access to information and people is so incredibly valuable and really is like our, you know, they don't call it the information age for nothing. Like this is
Right.
our contribution, our time's contribution to culture.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
if you know, we could stop literally setting the planet on fire so that we
Just
would
for a
live
second.
have like 2 or 3 more generations, maybe it would do a lot of good. I also think like one of the things that is super interesting to me, and I'm gonna think of this as a or like a I will argue that this is a kind of conversation is or kind of communication is open source like crowd sourcing,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which I think is an absolutely amazing way to share information in a way that can make development and science and stuff move so much faster. So,
Hmm.
like, the idea that you could merge your laboratory with a laboratory in Cairo and the two of you could together like do synergistic work that you could never have done before when you had to like fax something over to someone or write a letter or you
Yeah.
could be running like simultaneous testing and collaborating on things or that
I
you
mean,
can
they just did that with the vaccine. I mean, that's what was happening.
right.
Labs all over the world were working on it at the same time and sharing information so that they
Yep.
could get there faster. I mean, can you imagine if they did that with everything, everything?
Yes, I can.
You
I can
know?
imagine
Right?
if only people would stop stopping it from
Stop the
happening.
gatekeeping. Yeah.
Stop the
Yeah.
gatekeeping.
But
Yeah.
also
Well,
crowdfunding as well. And as
absolutely.
crowdsourcing, like there were, projects and things, people getting help and
Mhm.
products coming to market and stuff like that, that you wouldn't see if they had to go through normal channels.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that that's why like whenever I get really frustrated looking at Twitter and it's like people just the same silly straw man arguments setting these things up to knock them down kind of
Hmm.
bullshit. Every time I get really like I look at that and I get irritated, I try to remind myself that that is the byproduct, right? Like that's the runoff. That's the kind of stuff that is a product of any time that you have a democratization of voices, but that like or maybe democratization is not a great word because our current state of democracy is like truly troubling, but a kind of like an equity of voices, people having
Hmm.
access, more voices having access. Like, of course, you're going to run into more people saying things that are not what your friend group would say or not what you would want to hear. And some of it's super damaging. And I think that we need to do a lot better at controlling it.
Hmm.
But I do try to remind myself that you can rarely have one without the other. Like you can
Yeah.
rarely have a preponderance of voices without having some that are yelling awful bullshit really loud.
Hmm.
And that, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No, I do. And I agree. And I think one of the things that I do like about TikTok is there are a lot more voices on there that will correct misinformation. Like you see a lot of doctors and nurses who take the video and they let you, take a clip from it and then they say, okay, let me just rebut this whole thing and tell you how false all of this is. And they break it down with facts and numbers and whatever. That I think is fantastic. And I think the ability for things to just take off there Like we were talking earlier about bands, you know, getting their start on TikTok, like somebody's in their bedroom. There's a lot of pandemic artists. A lot of people like, you know, broke through during the pandemic because their song went viral to some dance on TikTok. And that, you know, as difficult as it is to make it as an artist in any medium in this world, to have a channel that lets you break through like that and reach millions of people like that. I mean, you know, that's phenomenal. That's just amazing. And, you know, as authors, we were saying books hit the lists because people on the book talk are reading them and sharing them and talking about how much they love them. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's just amazing. But yeah, we do have to pull up with some bullshit for that.
totally. And like I always try to think about the fact that or one of the things that I'm trying very hard to remind myself of always, but especially in the pandemic, is that like you can't have generally the good parts of something without having the bad parts.
Mhm.
It's a feature, not a bug, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
someone being able to respond really quickly uh to a bunch of ignorant shit is the flip side of someone being able to get information out there really quickly to crowdsource a solution to a problem. And
mhm.
someone like making a rude horrible comment is the flip side of someone being able to make a supportive, loving
Yeah,
comment. And
yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't neutralize it. It doesn't make those things good or appealing or not harmful. But
Mhm.
I have tried to remind myself a lot recently, whilst, you know, like stuck inside and consuming a lot of media,
Yeah.
that yeah, that sometimes the things that are the most irritating are like the literal flip sides of the most beneficial things, and that
Mhm.
I don't actually want to reject the one if it would mean rejecting the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I will say that I'm super screen sick. Like I didn't have the thing in the pandemic that so many people had, where I got like where I wanted to get out of my house or go places. I love being in my house and I hate people and I don't want to go anywhere. But what I do definitely have is like
Screen
everything.
fatigue.
Yes, thank you. That's the word. It's like everything being mediated via a
Mhm.
screen. And so
Yeah.
last episode we were talking about me going to Cape Cod for 2 weeks and like not having, first of all, the power was out a lot of the time elsewhere on the island because there was a nor'easter and like the cell service was out and there was no internet. But also just like being in a place where you can kind of maybe not detox, because I don't think screens are toxic, but
Just
like get a
disconnect.
disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that like people talk about that as if it's something that's new to social media, when
Mm.
actually, like, if you're anything but a super extrovert, you have to go detox, quote unquote, or like get a break from people, or that's what people do when they leave work at the end of the day. You know, you have to like let the work day fall away so that you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
get ready for your night. So I don't think that that's actually like a new thing.
No, absolutely
It's
not.
just more visible when I'm like, oh my God, get these, like it's a TV, it's a work day, it's a thing to write on, it's a thing to watch podcasts on. It's like, good, go slam the computer, get it away from me, like give
Yeah.
me a fucking like a tablet or something.
Did you
I
see
mean,
the article? There was an article and I didn't get a chance to read it because you know how you're looking at something and then it refreshes and then you lose it. But the headline was something about these girls on TikTok who are developing tics, like physical tics from being on TikTok or watching TikTok or something. And I didn't catch what that was about, but I really want to look further into that because like I don't know what's happening. Like what is that, like a real phenomenon or is it just a clickbaity thing?
I
You
don't
know?
know. I'm so a tick baby thing. Um, I'm so sorry. I apologize to everyone. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I mean, every, you know, people, if you have an obsessive personality, it's easy to get obsessed with TikTok or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is. Like, you know, I remember when Instagram got really big, people were talking about um, how it forced, you know, especially particularly people identified as young women into these like false beauty standards because everything, the angles and the filters and all that other stuff. And now that's transferred over to TikTok. You know, there's this whole like, I think it was like 6 months ago, there's a whole thing about fitness talk and how it was like promoting these like body dysmorphia and all kinds of stuff. And it was like a really toxic sort of corner that I think they kind of got rid of a lot of it. Just like, you know, closing those accounts down who were just promoting just really unhealthy, you know, practices and stuff like that. So hopefully that's not still going on. But I think, I mean, that, you know, people were saying that about, you know, AOL back in the day and like LiveJournal and stuff. There was that corner that was it. Tumblr too. It's just that corner that's like, oh, this is some bad stuff happening over here, but you don't throw the whole thing out just because there's like you said, a few bad apples or whatever.
Yeah, and that's I just think that that is like that is a thing that is going to exist on in real life, and then
Hmm.
it transfers into internet and social media. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't there in real life. It just means that
Exactly.
you didn't know about it.
Exactly. Right.
Like
Yeah. That's
every single generation, every group of like parents are worried about something that their kids are doing.
yeah.
Every group of grandparents is worried about something that their kids are doing. Like it's, if it's
Yeah.
not online, it's offline. If it's not offline, it's online. It's always existed. It's always going to exist. People have like unhealthy beauty standards have been with us forever.
Hmm.
And
Well, it's like
people,
people didn't understand what was happening with like the justice system until they saw it on social media, and it's like, well, this is not new,
yeah,
or like my dad said something like, oh, well, it just seems like there's a lot going on in the world. It's like, no, we're just hearing about it. Like it's not that this stuff wasn't going on before. It's just
exactly. The
that you have
24
access to
hour
information now.
Yeah, totally. The
Yeah.
24-hour news cycle is just a 24-hour coverage of news that was always going on all
Yeah.
the. And I think
Yeah.
it does, like you were saying at the beginning, like it does change our interface, our brains, the way we make connections by having like
Mhm.
being bombarded by so much information. But
Yeah.
I also think like there are people who, I mean, when I was in grad school, I didn't have social media, but I did get bombarded with so much information all the time because I was in classes and I
Hmm.
was reading and I was studying and it felt the same.
Hmm.
It felt exactly like the same kind of like, oh my God, my brain is like wah wah wah. I
Yeah.
gotta
Yeah.
down and like stare at a corner for a while. And like that is exactly how I feel when I watch a ton of TikToks or something. And it's like I think it depends on who you are. Like when I watch TikToks, I'm like, oh my gosh, this person just taught me how to communicate with crows. So now when I buy my house in the country, I'll be the creepy crow lady who's nuts to the crows and talking to them to make them come like swarm around me. And I'm watching that because that is what I would want to be like looking up in a library if I had a library. So
Right.
I don't think it fundamentally changes like the content that we choose. It just changes the ease of our access to.
Access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think, like what you were saying before about classes for kids, for like media classes, I think they should have that for seniors as well,
Totally.
because especially like the last two election cycles have shown us that seniors are susceptible to it way more, I think, than the youth. Like it's really difficult. Like even talking to my mom-in-law, it's like really difficult to get her to understand the difference between a CNN clip on YouTube and some dude in his basement with a suit and a green screen,
Which I don't
like.
really understand what the confusion is, to be honest, but I know that it's a thing. Like I
Yeah.
totally know that
Yeah.
that's right, but I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
see what the confusion would be.
Yeah. Yeah. This
But
thing is an alternate use source. They're trying to be, get information from all corners. They think of it as an alternate. It's like, no, it's not real. It's just
right.
some dude with a theory or conspiracy theory or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, I call myself a social media butterfly because I kind of dabble on most of the channels. We have to as authors. I mean, you don't have to, but in order to reach readers, you go where they are. So I think
Totally. And I think it's interesting because I don't have any personal social media. I only have social media for my author world life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that also has helped me because I'm not using social media as an attempt to connect with my friends
Yeah, me
or,
neither. Yeah.
like, or to
Yeah.
like stay updated about people I went to high school with. Like
Yeah.
I for like a couple years, a friend that I met made me a Facebook page so we could stay in touch, and I like used it and then I canceled it. But I've never had much social media personally, but I can see that it would feel different if because like my goal on social media is clear. It's to connect with readers. It's
Mm-hmm.
to talk about my books and the things that interest me that aren't related to my books. It's to be super hilarious and have nobody notice. Like this is why I'm on social media.
Yeah.
But I guess if it were an attempt to like stay connected with friends or family or whatever, maybe I would feel differently about how it's impacted my communication. But as it
Yeah.
stands, I
I mean,
don't.
I'm on my Zio social media 95% of the time, and my personal social media I hardly ever touch. It's like, if I get a reminder or someone comments or tags me in something, or if it's a birthday or whatever. But
Mhm.
other than that, I don't really spend much time on there. It's connecting with authors, with readers, with bloggers, with indie bookstores, whatever it is. Like that's where I spend most of my time on social media, and just like having fun,
Yeah,
and
same.
try not to get
I,
too angry at some of the
oh my
some of the other stuff.
God. Yeah, I'm still figuring out TikTok. I love it as a consumer. I love looking at it, but I haven't really found my niche as a creator of content yet. And maybe I won't, I don't know, but I just feel it's interesting. Like I love reading, obviously. I write books, but since that's my job, it's like I'm not interested in that corner of TikTok. So like
Mm,
I mean I love getting book recommendations. So I do, if you do follow people who
mhm.
do book stuff, but like that's not where I'm active or where I want, like I'm on TikTok because I want to learn weird shit about how to make crows be friends with me and like all this stuff. And so I don't know really how to marry those two things yet, to like make it both a platform of social media and make it be kind of delightful to me personally.
Mhm.
And maybe there is no marriage of it, but I would be super interested if anyone listening has thoughts about like, when you follow authors, do you want them on TikTok specifically? Like, do you want us to just talk about our books? Is that why you're there? Or are you interested in us as human beings? Or are you interested in like our opinions about politics, our opinions about social issues, our opinions about making crows befriend you by giving them peanuts? In case anyone can't tell, I really am fixated on making crow
So, do you
friends.
really like crows?
I'm obsessed with them.
I know. It's so awesome. Well, there's a clubhouse chat that happens every once in a while. I've been to two of them, but it's about TikTok and authors on TikTok and the
Ooh,
algorithms, all that stuff. But it's interesting to hear what people do to engage their audience, especially people who are just coming into it. Like I just reached 1,000 followers last week, and it was like, oh my God, I have 1,000 followers. I don't know how it happened because I was stuck at like a few hundred for the longest time. And I just, I'm always doing the music stuff. I do my book stuff, but like yesterday or this morning, I posted myself reading from someone else's book. I was like, because someone was like, you should read your books. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But like recommend a book to me to read and I'll read like a little bit from it. So I did that today. So maybe I'll do that, like pick a random, I'm going to read from one of your books, but I'm going to like pick a book and just read because, just for fun. But I just said, like you, I just want to have fun on there and also share who I am as an author and whatever. But social media, I don't think it's destroying anything. I think it's still new enough that we need to learn how to use it wisely.
yeah, well said.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, thank you so much for tuning in with us for another episode of Dear Romance Writer. We really want to hear from you. So please send your letter. We have anonymous form that you can fill out. You can DM us on social media. So use social media to DM us.
Yes.
But we do want to hear from you. So send in your questions. We can't wait to give you some more questionable advice. We will see you next time. And Avery will hopefully be back from her little bug. We're sending you chicken noodle soup, Avery, so feel better. See you soon.
Bye. Thank you so much for subscribing to Dear Romance Writer. Remember to keep sending in those letters at dearromancewriter.com. We can't wait to tell you what to do. Dear Romance Writer is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love, frolic.media/podcasts.